Welcome to the third session of the month-long series of gender sensitization and capacity development program organized by the Research Center for Women's Studies, SNDT Women's University in collaboration with UGC. The resource persons for today's session is Professor Vibhuti Patel. Vibhuti Patel is the former professor for Advanced Center for Women's Studies, School of Development Studies at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. She was also the former head of Department of Economics, head of the postgraduate studies at SNDT Women's University. She was awarded the visiting fellowship to the London School of Economics and Political Science. She is a recipient of numerous awards, author and co-author of more than 12 books, edited and co-edited 9 books. She has more than 100 research papers to her credit, and we are still counting. She's on the editorial board of various national and international journals. She has been on the government bodies and committees and instrumental in policy shaping. She is on the board of trustees of Vacha, Sehat, Gandhi Shikshan, and many others. Her expertise and guidance is constantly sought by women's groups. She is an inspiration to the young academicians, women's studies scholars, and apart from her academic and professional credentials, Vibhuti Patel is fondly known as Vibhuti Ben in the social circles. She has a strong connect with the grassroots level women's organizations and social organizations, a torchbearer to the cause of gender issues, and has a pulse on the ground inequalities that the society is confronted with. Always taking up the issues of the marginalized and bringing their voices in the forefront. She has this unique ability to connect with people from all walks of life. And we were fortunate to hear her speak at various occasions. And one thing that is very special about her is that she would recite a powerful poem which expresses the deep anguish or the painful struggle of the marginalized. Besides this, she is one of few people who have got that photographic memory, because if you meet Vibhuti Patel, once she will remember your name. And also by narrating the anecdotes of some of the early women's studies pioneers such as Neera Desai, she would connect the old with the new and thus bring alive not only the incidents but also the person for those who were not fortunate to meet the pathbreakers. So let us welcome the distinguished academician, economist, public policy influencer and activist, Professor Vibhuti Patel. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta Desai, for such a touching introduction to me. I'm really, like, RCWS is like a family. I'm thankful to Dr. Pupil Sathe and SNDT Women's University for giving me this opportunity for such a prestigious certificate course in collaboration with the University Grants Commission. It has a great value. And here I see in the list, there are women's studies scholars, there are academicians, there are young researchers, MPhil and PhD students, and also social.
Voice is very soft. Yeah, I think.
Okay, now is it okay?
Yeah. This
now,
is better.
Okay, because the speaker is closer to my mouth. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So it is a really very important event, and I think I see people from participants are from very socio-political backgrounds and also educational backgrounds. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion. And it is also the most burning issue, which now, right from the policymakers to the grassroots workers have been discussing. And the missing link is a gender, because migration, the general understanding about migration is that it's only male migration. And if you see all the discourses around pandemic, only because of the pictures and because of the videos that we know that women migrants also are facing acute problem, in fact, the multiple problems, but still in the policy discourses, whether you are talking, whether it's a national level policy discourse or a global policy discourse, mostly like understand when we talk about migrants, it is only about migrant man. So we have seen, like, under all four stages of lockdown and 3 stages of unlock, still the problems of migrants, migrant workers have not been eased. On the contrary, the newer dimensions have emerged. And we all, if we see even the history of the pandemics and epidemics, whether it is a smallpox epidemics, plague epidemics, tuberculosis epidemics, Ebola epidemics in Africa in the 21st century, only beginning of the 21st century, and the SARS, we have seen that except for Ebola, like in Africa, nobody focused on what happened to women and children. So the gender was not even the being discussed. It was only when the massive number of women started, they died, the reproductive health, maternal deaths were very high, women delivered babies with small brains. It was that angle where the public health emergency focused, the focus on public health emergency was also with regard to gender concerns. We saw, like in 1994, epidemic of bubonic plague and pneumonic plague, which was in Surat, which was heavily documented. Even OUP has published a book by Ghanshyam Shah on the plague. But even, and Surat is a city where you have 55% of the population is that of a migrant workers population. It's an industrial hub of garment sector, and also variety of small scale industries. But still, we don't see any gender analysis so far as the this kind of a health emergency was concerned. There is some in history, there is a mention that Savitribai Phule died while looking after the plague patients of plague, or we have seen like women as a care workers, how what kind of emergencies they faced during immediately after the Second World War. So from only that much of mention is there. But when it comes to the macro policies or any conceptual understanding or discourses on by the researchers, you hardly see special focus on gender. So currently, for the first time, because of the UN Women's Initiative for last 6 months, right from January 2020, gender has been highlighted in the op-eds every fortnightly issued by UN agencies, whether it's a UNHCR or WHO or UN Women. And the responses that you get, one response is that like do nothing, which most of the Asian countries haven't done nothing so far as the gender concerns in migration are concerned. Feminists have made major contribution. They have written extensively in last 6 months. So many articles and researches have been done. Rapid assessment studies have been done. And another scenario that emerges is the take action now. So we can see so many Scandinavian countries, Europe, where the health experts and public policy experts, they are focusing on gender concerns. But the mainstream discourse largely is only talking about the economic disadvantages of the lockdown and what kind of fiscal deficit that we are going to face. And as it is, the economy, world economy was slowing, and on the top of it, this emergency came. Major issue where we are talking about gender concerns is the staff shortage, because you know that in the care industry, healthcare industry also, 70% of the care workers are women, whether they are nurses or auxiliary staff or the sanitary workers. And in our context, because even the ICDS centers, which are run by the Anganwadi workers and also ASHA workers in the rural area, which is a major flagship program of the state, a National Rural Health Mission. And the first time, like, we are seriously discussing, even where the health ministers are also now, they have started complaining about such a low investment in public health in India, like when the public health investment is less than 1%, 0.8% of GDP is there, where the UN, whether it is in Millennium Development Goal or Sustainable Development Goal, there was a demand that minimum 6% of GDP must be invested. All our neighboring countries in the SAARC region, whether it is in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, Nepal, all of them have a much higher percentage of GDP invested in public health. And now for the first time, we are seeing that after 1991, where the neoliberal logic of market and privatization of healthcare took place in a big way, we are now, and the way private health sector responded to this emergency, the question of emphasis on public health discourse has emerged. And in that also, we have seen recently, currently, ASHA workers are on strike, nurses are wearing black, they are wearing black badge, march to protest against no kind of social security, social protection, or personal protection equipments are given to them, and they are working under extremely hazardous condition, where all other workers, they get a 14 days quarantine, nurses are getting 3 days quarantine or 7 days quarantine. That is also very, very difficult for them to cope up with. We have also seen that in the rural areas, when the stoppage of harvesting took place after lockdown, hunger and starvation became very acute, about which now some reports are coming, but otherwise during lockdown phase 1, 2, and 3, we did not see the massive incidences of hunger and starvation, and especially among women, because Indian women eat last, least, and leftovers. So that is also, whenever there is a food scarcity, they are the ones who face the most. And today now all the WHO and even health ministry is talking about special focus on the declining nutritional standards among women and children that they are talking. And all this is happening when this kind of a health emergency and socio-economic crisis we are facing. We also see the corrupt forces both in the private sector and the public sector, where the rent-seeking behavior of the doctors in a public hospital and the touts which are there as a gatekeepers who are asking for a massive bribe, private health practitioners who would demand 2,500 to 4,000 rupees from the migrant workers to get 2-line certificate to move everywhere. There are nakabandis and there are barriers. So even the police, they are also letting loose the repression. Ration shop owners, transport sector, everywhere we are seeing the complete breakdown of the system, which is multiplying the woes of the migrant population. Now, we must focus on the relationship of poverty and migration. You must have seen this map, which was released on in the month of January this year only, that the regions which are where the poverty level is very high, like Bihar has more than half of the population, which is classified as a poverty group. Jharkhand has 46%, Madhya Pradesh has 40%, UP, Assam, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Meghalaya, Rajasthan is more than nearly one third of the population, which is below poverty line. And that's why we see that these are the forces of lack of employment, no livelihoods resources being left, that forces people to migrate. And migration has a very strong connection with the socio-economic educational inequality. So we have a middle class Indians migrating to other countries for education, because it is supposed to, education in Europe and America is supposed to be which can give you a better future prospects. So inequality is clearly a major driver of migration. And international migration is a powerful symbol of global inequality, whether in terms of wages or life opportunities or lifestyle. And millions of workers and their families move each year across borders in the continents and seeking to reduce what they see as a gap between their own position and that the people in other or wealthier places. According to the United Nations, there were 258 million international migrants, that is 25 crore migrants internationally they moved in December 2017, and increasingly concentrated in the more developed regions of the country. So there is a one level of migration at that, a global migration. And in the internal migration, when we see within the poor countries, with a permanent, temporary or seasonal migration, it reflects both the perceived and the actual inequality of opportunity between the places. It is not just inequality between sending and receiving areas that promotes migration, but inequality within the sending areas that can also generate migration. Okay, so with like those who have a land, they will remain in the village, but those who have lost out their land, they don't, if there is a drought, they don't have any other assets. So it is the assetless poor within the village, they will be forced to migrate, because the choice is between hunger, starvation, and moving away from the place and going to the greener pasture. So since more unequal villages tend to produce more migrants than less unequal villages. So the villages in which, like we can see that most of the villages where you had a zamindari system, absentee landlordism, complete concentration and centralization of land resources and livelihood resources, you would see that large majority of villages, they'll be forced to migrate. Now, gender differential impact for women and girls, like we can see that the whole idea of social distancing, which was demanded by the lockdown and because coronavirus pandemic, that also created a lot of woes for the migrant population, especially women and children, because the sanitation issue became a very important. You are supposed to wash your hands. Where do you get water from? In the slums, like if 60% of the population is living in the urban slum, where do they get, how do they maintain physical distancing? There was a big discourse even about the term social distancing, which has its connotation, which has its legacy and the historical roots in caste system. And globally, it is in the apartheid and slave system. So can we use this term because Shudras and Atishudras, they had to maintain social distance from the upper caste Savarnas. So there was the WHO also said that we should not use this term and it should be body distancing or physical distancing. Now, even this body distancing and physical distancing was not possible for majority of the migrant population because most of them, they live in the slums with a cramped existence and this thing. And it is in this context that UN Women issued a statement about and when they launched the website called In Focus Gender Equality Matters in COVID-19. And they said that COVID-19 pandemic is not just a health issue, but it is a profound shock to our societies and economies, and women are at the heart of the care and response efforts underway. As frontline responders, health professionals, community workers, transport and logistic managers, scientists, and they are playing very critical role in addressing this health emergency. Most caregivers in home or in the communities are women. Additionally, they are also at the increased risk of infection and loss of livelihood. An existing trend points to less access to sexual and reproductive health and the rise of domestic violence in the crisis. And what we have seen when it came to migrant women workers, there has been disproportionately affected by job loss. Currently, if you read the Ashwini Deshpande's research or the rapid assessment studies by Indian Social Studies Trust, they all are saying that more than 40% of the current job loss is that by women. So the same logic of the market economy, that women are to be recruited last at the phase of economic expansion, but the moment there is economic crisis, there is the first they are to be fired. Yesterday's report of MG Narega is also showing that once the reverse migration started and the male workers reached the villages, the percentage of women in Narega, because we all know that Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme, 2/3 of the workforce was that of a woman, because the Narega wages are less than the minimum wages of the state. But currently in the crisis period where men are facing massive unemployment and they from the urban areas, they have gone back to their extended families in the villages, they are the ones who have listed themselves for the jobs, and both at a level like the pressure from the family, where the man has to be the whole entitlement of a man, that man is a breadwinner and he is the first opportunity of a job should go to the man of the family. So that is there. And also at an operational level, whether it is a district commissioner's office or the contractors or all those who are working in the government offices, all of them also have a strong patriarchal bias that when so many men are unemployed, why should women be given job? So that those forces and those kind of factors also play very important role. We have also seen that those who are in those who are in the gig economy or those who are in the urban offices and all, there is a reduction in the working hours, and many of them who are on a contract job, they are also losing ground. The kind of conceptual and operational biases that we find whenever the data on reasons for migration are given, like even the question, all the migration data, if you see, this is the standard table you get from a census. This is the 2011 census, which says that reasons for migration for men from rural to rural migration, it would be 31.5, while women would be hardly less than 2%. Marriage is the major reason for the migration. So for work, men are migrating mostly, and marriage is the reason for migration for nearly 89% women. Same from urban to rural migration also, you see it is the marriage remains the major concern. Rural to urban, urban to urban, all these migration data, if you see that at least urban to urban, there is bit respectable, nearly 35% of men, and women when it comes to, it's only 3% women who are supposed to have migrated for work or employment. Otherwise, it is largely the marriage that is given as a reason for migration. Now, one thing we forget, that wherever they are, whether they are in a parent's family or whether they are in in-laws family, women are working. But the migration data will only focus on women migrating for marriage. While, so we can see the conceptual biases also, that you don't ask that the kind of questions which are asked to women migrants, that why did you migrate? She would say that I got married and came to this thing. But after coming to in-laws place also, what kind of job she's doing, whether she's doing a home-based work or she's in the care economy, she collects livelihood resources, that kind of a connections are not made in the migration data. And that's why it is always seen that a man as a breadwinner, that is the model which is mostly used in the migration studies. Migrant women's work profile, in the origin, what was she doing where in the original place, and what is she doing at the destination place? You hardly see many any studies except for Indrani Majumdar study or a couple of studies done by Center for Women's Development Studies. You don't get the profile of women migrating for this thing. And we know, like this particular crisis has shown, we saw hordes and hordes of women who were migrating. They were either domestic workers, or they were vendors, or they were working in a nano sector or a micro sector, MSME sector, and they also had to leave the place because they lost the job under lockdown and they had no money to pay the rent to the landlords. So even when we are doing the, like even if you see the SWAN report, which is highly appreciated, and media has, all mainstream media has taken note of that report, Rapid Assessment Survey, which is done by several NGOs came together, or even the study by Jivika, all of them are focusing on male migration. So even in the reverse migration of the workers or professionals or students due to COVID-19 induced lockdown, whether it's international migration, interstate migration, intrastate migration, we see focus is largely on man, and women are perceived as a man and the family members. No, so women as a either women migrating for education, women migrating for work, women migrating for small business, self-employment, those kind of data you can get only from organizations like Viego or self-employed women's organization. Seva was the first one to come out with the study immediately within 15 days of lockdown, they got up. Now, if we see the workforce, so labor force participation and workforce participation, the history of that in our Indian economy in the 21st century, we know that it was around 2000, we all were boasting about a U-shaped curve phenomena where more and more women were entering the workforce. So in the year 2000, it was data showed that 30% of, that means 1/3 of the women in the 15 to 59 age group were in the workforce. By 2005, it reached up to 32%. But after that, what we see is a continuous slowing down and weeding out of women from the working place, from their workplace and from the gainful employment. So labor force participation rate of India has been declining continuously, and that also affects the data about the migrant women. Even if we do the international comparison, there also globally also, if we see, India is considered to be laggard nation state so far as the labor force participation rate is concerned. Even in the World Economic Forum, they said that if India is able to harness the woman power of for the economic growth, then the growth in India will have a like 65% more GDP. So that means it is a inability of the economy to use the talent of women, and especially when you have now women with variety of qualifications, especially UGC and all are boasting about more and more enrollment of women in the higher education institution. But even at that level, you see 40% of the women MBAs, they leave the workforce after marriage or maternity. Now, within this, within that macro background, we have to see that what has happened under the coronavirus pandemic. So, gendered experiences of COVID-19 are determined by the intersections of inequalities in the labor markets, which are labor markets, as we know that labor markets are not neutral. There are no free forces of labor market. The labor markets are socially constructed. What kind of job you will get, what kind of opportunities you will get, what kind of entitlements you will be having, that depends on your class, caste, religion, location, and its interplay with the gender. So that is very important. Another thing is that intra-household power relations during the stay-at-home and lockdown orders, they are also impacting men and women differentially. That's why it is very important that we focus on this issue. There is a domestic violence, sexual violence, child sexual abuses in the camps, in the confinement zones, in the shelter homes, even while going back to their native place on the road. We have seen there are so many incidences have been reported. Frontline healthcare workers, most of them are migrant workers, whether they are nurses or ayabais or asha workers or Anganwadi workers. Either they are the migrants from intrastate migrant or interstate migrant. They have also faced tremendous problems under the lockdown. Government intervention for food security and shelter homes, like the relief workers were getting calls from the nurses that they did not have personal protection equipment. There were so many sanitation workers who had not got ration. So even at that level, when they are the frontline workers also, they were deprived of the basic necessities for them to continue to work, because their services were essential services, but still nobody cared for them. Testing for coronavirus and other social policies, that too the nurses demanded. We know that when so many nursing students were roped in for the frontline work, none of them were provided any kind of testing. None of them were provided any kind of protective gear. The social protection policies also missed out on such important section of the care workers. So impact of shift in priorities of public health services, that we saw that all the corona maternity wards were converted into COVID wards. All states after states did that, because there is such a shortage of the public health facilities, whether it was in a peri-urban areas or in a metropolis or in the district places. So all the services were converted into corona services, and that's why the usual health services, for example, ICDS services, where the vaccination is given to children, tetanus injections are given to women, or midday meal is provided, all those services just stopped. And it is in this context that we saw those horror pictures where the migrant women, they deliver babies, like even 27 women delivered babies in a Shramik train. So many of them delivered babies on the road. So many of them delivered babies, like sugarcane workers of Maharashtra. They delivered babies in the field, and it was the ASHA workers who helped them deliver the babies. So many places, even the police or the sanitation workers, they had also pitched in. So when we see that when you don't declare reproductive health services, which are so crucial to women, what kind of human miseries are created. Now, differential impact of COVID-19 infection and also the resultant mortality and morbidity rates by gender, caste, ethnicity, and class. We are getting the studies about how differentially, because it was told that COVID virus doesn't choose it affects everybody equally. Maybe the infection may be affecting everybody equally, but the kind of the support system and health services and the nutrition, food and nutrition that is provided, that is also very important to fight against the disease. While most of the migrant people, and especially migrant women, if you read the interviews done by the rapid assessment survey of SEWA or ISST shows, even IWAGE has done the study where the women say that corona will kill us later. First, we will die of hunger. No, so that was a major. So even the basic survival needs were not this thing, and the overall understanding of the local decision makers, whether they are decision makers of the local self-government bodies, all the elected representatives, all the people who are implementing the macro policies or Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana or Garib Kalyan Yojana, all of them have a patriarchal mindset, which is determined by the thinking that men have a more right to jobs. No. So that's why they would not care for unemployment of women. In fact, the study, that ISST study also shows that 85% of the domestic workers in Delhi had not received their salary for the month of March, April, May. I think the study was done in June. And they said, had the relief workers not given them a ration kit, they would have died of starvation. But still, the authorities did not consider that important, that they are the section to be catered to. So they remained excluded even when you don't have a status of a worker, when you are not there in the, your concerns are not visibilized in the policy discourses, then you are left out of whatever emergency measures or the social security or the social protection that the state provides. Now, another very important thing that has emerged with regards to migrant women is the gender stereotypes and the unpaid care work. Like, as care work is stereotyped as women's domain around the world, women spend 2 to 10 times more time on unpaid care work than men. This unequal distribution of caring responsibilities linked to discriminatory social institutions, and also it stereotypes the gender roles. Like, data from the rapid assessment surveys also show that in all countries, women are more likely to see increase in both domestic work as well as unpaid care work. So even the migrant workers who are either who are now unemployed or sitting at home, or those who have gone back to their native place, they are overburdened with the unpaid care work. In addition, they also are more likely than men to say they are in charge of performing 3 types of activities: unpaid child care, unpaid adult care, unpaid domestic care, and also the care of ill people, because the public health system has washed off his hands. They are overburdened. And first they talked about social isolation, social distancing, then they talked about social isolation, now they talked about the home isolation, and last stage is now home care. It is the women of the in your household who is going to look after you. So it's not the health system. While the men do concentrate on fewer tasks like a shopping for the household or playing with the children. That is a global survey based on the data from 182 countries. When it comes to the unpaid care work and among the informal sector, because most of the informal sector workers, they get less than 10,000 rupees salary. So casual workers, contract workers and all. So 92% of the women in workforce are getting only less than 10,000 salary, and 82% of men in the Indian economy in the informal sector, they get less than 10,000 work. Now, if you see these informal sector workers, mostly they are migrant workers, men give 32 minutes per day in a rural areas for unpaid care work, while women are giving 291 minutes per day. Say in the urban areas, men give even lesser, 29 minutes per day for unpaid care work, while women are giving 312 minutes per day. That is more than 6 hours per day. Women are giving for unpaid care work, so bringing water, standing in a queue for ration, or looking after the ill people. So whatever the household survival needs, they are the ones who are doing the unpaid care work. Still, the response of the corporate world, response of the employers organization is completely oblivious of this reality. And that's why you see none of them have even talked about value of this unpaid care work. All of them are crying hoarse about economy is closed, economy is closed. What economy is not closed? Everyone is looking after, everyone is cooking, everyone is caring, everyone is looking after their dear ones. And still this part of the contribution which the women have done, that has been completely invisibilized. And that's why you see only two employers, basically Tata Steel and Swiggy, they at least talked about the care special leave for care quarantine people. Otherwise, others have not even talked about it. Now, coming to the MSME sector, the micro, small, medium and enterprise sector, for which Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana has given a lion's share. 11,000 crore rupees are given to the MSME, to rejuvenation of the economy. In that also, if we see, only 9% enterprises are managed by women, and these are the enterprises, what would you call, running a pav vada stall, or running or managing some vegetable shop, or working in a it's not even micro. Micro means you would have 10 workers, but this is a nano, a single 1 or 2 women doing the job. That is the kind of enterprises that women are in, and they were the ones who are completely ruined under the lockdown. So they are just survival types, like you sell your food, and then you get your daily necessity. You invest in this thing for the next day, then you survive. So that is a kind of a basic survival. It is at that stage that women entrepreneurs are there, about which we talk a lot about it on paper, but actually nobody does the financial their hand holding. So they are the ones who don't have any resources now under the lockdown. They are not even considered as credit worthy, because none of them are even classified as workers. So financial and social capital they don't have, because most of the migrant women, they are confined to their job, either their relationship, they are completely controlled existence they have. So how do you build your social capital? To build the social capital, you have to interact, you have to circulate, you have to network. Those opportunities women are losing, they don't get. So, and financial institution would not consider them as credit worthy. They face the double burden of financial constraints and also the patriarchal pressure. Home-based micro enterprises are there, so they don't have any social capital outside the family. So you can't upscale your, whether it's a vegetable vending job, or a food processing job, or a food preservation job, or anything that you are doing, you can't upscale without social capital and friends. The only social capital you have, your friends and your neighbors. Known resources from the factor market and also the financial market are not available. So if you want raw material like Seva, why did Seva start Seva Hut? Because that was the problem which most of the self-employed and informal sector women face. That factor market is completely controlled by men, or a financial market is completely controlled. It has a strong patriarchal bias which thinks that women cannot be given big amounts. So microfinance, okay, we will give you 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees, but when it comes to big capital, so that no bank or a financial institution would give. So this creates the supply side issues of women in the self-employed women. There is no training for new technology or cannot diversify in their business. So even those women who have left in the reverse migration, who have gone back to their villages, they are perceived as, because Narega is also closed for them, because men are there, they are not given new technology or any new opportunities are available. They are just perceived by the family as a one more mouth to be fed. And that's why you see so much of trafficking of women or a child marriages again resurging. So what we achieved after hundreds of years of social reform movement, all those historical achievements have been reversed. And that's why the wheels of history are turning backward, in a backward direction, where some of the very long fought struggles, and as a result of which we got right to education. Now with online education, most of the girls have dropped out. And even though migrant children, not only girls, the children of migrant workers, both boys and girls, they have been out of school. And we know that there is in last 4 months massive increase in child labor, whether it is in the small towns where they have gone back, or in the villages that we are finding. Suffering with the existing business, whatever little businesses they have, they are not economically viable. And the self-help groups and the women's cooperatives, they have, some of them have been able to diversify, and now they are making sanitary material, or they are making masks. And in the new circumstances of lockdown, they are trying to adjust in the current situation. Now, when it comes to frontline health workers, we have registered 9 lakh public health workers. Most of them are migrants. There is intersectionality of caste, class, and region. So, you know, so many sanitation workers, you would be knowing that they would become, they are from Haryana, or they are from certain parts of Gujarat. They only belong to the Dalit community. Women as health care providers make up 70% of the frontline healthcare workforce as doctors, nurses, ayabai, sanitary workers. If we include even Anganwadi workers who are in ICDS and ASHA workers who are in National Rural Health Mission, currently they are playing a vital role as frontline workers in the rural and urban areas. And also school teachers who are distributing PDS ration, and they are also exposing themselves to greater risk of infection. We have around over 10 lakh ASHA workers and 27 lakhs Anganwadi workers who don't even get wages. So currently we have seen, like just last week, 5 lakh ASHA workers were on strike. Or we have seen Anganwadi workers, they also had a sit-in because what they are asking for is a regularization of their job, because they are currently under the pandemic. They have to work for 12 to 16 hours a day. They have to manage all the emergencies, right from the illness and death and delivery and children's woes. They have to look after, but still they are given honorarium. They don't even have a status of being classified as a worker. So that is there. So women in a formal sector, we are seeing that they are the ones who have a better, relatively better of condition, though they are multitasking, doing housework, childcare, homeschooling, office work without any support of domestic worker, but still there is no fear of job loss. But this proportion is very small, but it is only 6% of the women who are in formal sector. So currently what we see under lockdown, that so many women who were a journalist or a lawyer or professionally qualified women, they have lost their job and they had to go back to their parents' house to stay with them. So you see so many young women professionals, migrant women professionals to the metropolis and other tier 2 cities. They have also lost out their job. Media coverage has been a lot on the middle class educated families and how they are coping with. But the major concern that we have when we talk about the migration. Hello. Yeah. So in a gender and migration, it is the women in informal sector. So most of the workforce in Indian organized sector, they are like 92% of them are in the informal sector. The 1/3 of them are own account workers. Who are the own account workers? A woman running a tea shop, or a woman selling a puri bhaji, or a person selling vegetables, or recycling workers. They all are own account workers, okay? Informal employees in informal sector, those who are working in a small scale industry or a factory or this thing, who are not given any kind of a permanency of job, or none of the labor legislations apply. So they are 30%. And then you have unpaid family workers. You go to Dharavi, you would see in every zone, whether it is a Kumbharwada, potter's zone, or a leather production, everywhere you would see women and children working, but they are not listed as a worker. They are the unpaid family workers. It's the head of the household who has a business in his name that is considered as a owner, but others are unpaid family workers. So we have around 18% of the workforce is unpaid family workers. This informalization has been more pronounced in case of women workers, because in India, 94% women are employed in unorganized sector, involved in work which lacks dignity of labor, social security, decent and timely wages, and in some cases even the right to be called as worker. And this is based on a recent study by Observer Research Foundation. And what we see is that gender-based segregation, that we see that 91 million jobs are lost between April and May by socially disadvantaged group. In that also, if we see, these are the official data, SC/ST, 25% of Dalit and tribal women have lost out their jobs. So here also we see that how intersectionality plays a very important role. So implications of this pandemic on the vulnerable population, these are the women-headed households. Even among the migrant workers, women-headed household managed by widows or separated or deserted or women or divorced women, they are the ones who are the most excluded. Even the study recently by Asha Hans in Orissa has also shown, because they did the rapid assessment study, interviews were taken on mobile and smartphone, and while doing the relief operation. So because while doing the relief operation, so many women's organizations have collected data. people with disability, women with disability, pregnant women, homeless people, street children, lonely elderly, a socially stigmatized transgender community, and sex workers, they have suffered the most. Currently, the prison studies have come. In fact, the public interest litigation is filed in Supreme Court of India that how the prisoners and inmates who are in the overcrowded shelter homes, they are also facing, like some prisons have reported 25% COVID positive patient. Yerwada reported some 30 more, 35%, 1/3 of the prisoners were COVID positive. The fatality rate is less, but they all have been infected. So informal sector workers, basically daily wage earners, head loaders, construction workers, street vendors, domestic workers, small scale manufacturing workers, recycling, scrap and garment industry, barbers, security guards, all of them, those who are whose survival is based on a daily wages or weekly wages or monthly wages, they are the ones who have lost everything because of the unemployment of last 5 months, and also confinement that did not allow them to do any kind of economic activity or even to diversify from whatever economic activity which they were doing in a pre-COVID period. So the challenges faced by the migrant workers, and some of the states responded very systematically. For example, Delhi's health budget is more than 6% of the Delhi state domestic product. Then Kerala intervened right from the very first case of a COVID patient who was a woman student who returned from China. She's the one. So right from January, Kerala had a very systematic plan of both protecting the migrants and at the same time seeing to it that they don't face any social stigma and their healthcare taken care of. Maharashtra initially, Maharashtra was more of a trial and error. So initially everyone was overwhelmed, but the dialogue between the administration, state governance structures and the civil society organizations tried to ease the situation. And similarly, we saw in Andhra Pradesh and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh also, the state was at least responsive. So responsible mainstream and proactive social media coverage. The question of a shelter has become central now that state has to play a significant role in providing right to housing. Now we must remember that when we talk about housing right, we are not talking about ownership right. It's not a property right. The state has to step in to see to it that if the country's economy, for the first time, we are even at least acknowledging that the migrant workers play the central role in running of the Indian economy. Okay, so they are the city makers, and without their labor, cities will collapse. So when you acknowledge that in your proclamations, at least state has to step in and see to it that low-cost housing, rental housing, state has to step in. You can't leave it to the market, you can't leave it to the private money landlords, and you can't leave it to the construction lobby. That they are not going to do it. The way during 50s and 60s and 70s and even in the colonial times, like when the textile industry was rising, every textile baron saw to it that the workers were in the proximity of the mill. Okay, they did for the selfish advantage, but at least they did it. The housings were provided, and that's how in Bombay we had BDD Chawl. In the Girangaon, where the 34 textile mills were there. So I think it is very important for the state to come up with the low rental housing so that any time, whether it is a natural disaster or any kind of emergency, whether it's a political emergency, social emergency, or natural or a health emergency, state can provide the kind of concessions at the time of emergency. For example, currently we are not asking for any Aadhaar or a ration card for any kind of a food distributed by state. Okay, so cereals and ration which is given by the state, because we know that there is a massive hunger generated due to lockdown. And so similarly, even about the housing, state would give the concession at the time of emergency, while the private forces which are governed by the profit motive, they would not do that. Universalization of PDS without conditionality of eligibility criteria of identification and domicile after dissemination of rapid assessment studies. I think that was very important. So many NGOs, CBOs, trade unions, SHGs, organizations like SEVA came up with the rapid assessment study and prevailed upon state. So many health organizations like People's Health Assembly, Doctors Without Borders, they also played a very important role to convince the state governments to universalize PDS. And there is also a demand currently of a universalization of public health. and healthcare services. The list of beneficiaries to be prepared, I think very important, and especially for the first time, because currently if you try, I was trying to get some very accurate gender disaggregated data on migration, but they are not available. So it's very important to have each state, and now it is easy because you have so many, like the everything is like with electronic IT enabled services, whether it is for the voters card or for the Aadhaar card, whenever we want, we get the data. So I think we need to have a data about the intrastate, interstate, and cross-country migration, I think, and gender differential data, and which sector of the economy they are there. I think that is also very, very important. And that would be, it's a win-win formula. It is not only for the social security and social protection of the migrant workers, but even the economy needs this data for a careful, like for the rejuvenation of the economy. Also, you need this kind of data. Water tankers, mobile toilets, distribution of masks. I think that that was very, very important intervention that was required for the migrant workers who were on move for a long time. Health post for the government organizations, and how the private healthcare sector behaved so irresponsibly that finally the state after state had to give the GR that they have to provide the services. But still today, we are finding that private health sector is doing nothing but fleecing people. Even those who have money, those who can pay user fee for the health services, they are also now so bad. So you can imagine what would be the predicament of the migrant workers who have lost out everything. They're completely resourceless. Reproductive and child health and helplines for the counseling services for the children, survivor of violence, students, individuals with mental health issue. I think they need to be institutionalized. It is not only because of the health emergency, but otherwise also we need to have, mainly in the context of massive trafficking of women and children that is taking place, a repatriation of migrant workers to the rural home, to their extended family, and some of the unresolved issues which the migrant workers are facing. And most of the women migrant workers have not been paid by their employers, whether they were in the small scale industry, or whether they were domestic workers, or whether they were working in places like MG Narega. Also 1/3 of the wages women were getting, where men were getting 320 rupees, women were getting 120 rupees. So that even when the state is employer, government is employer, women are facing this level of complete biases when it comes to wages. In 2011 census, I showed that we have 3 crore women migrant workers in our country, and most of them are facing currently also major crisis, mainly because of the intervention. And it was only when such photographs and video clips started appearing that you realize that women on their own as workers were also migrating. And now so many FGDs done by the trade unions and the women's organizations are also bringing out their issue. And it was the social solidarity which was provided by the civil society organizations that also helped in getting data, and also helped in establishing rapport with the migrant workers. And these migrant workers were wherever they were, whether they were in the relief camp or a containment zone, or they were they were in a isolation. Everywhere they were putting in their labor. Okay, they were not just sitting idle. So that is also very important to understand. And so many need assessment studies of women migrant workers, whether they were working in the bricklin, or they were working as a recycling workers, or whether they were working in a small scale industry. Their data is now only micro level area studies have shown the data. What we need is a macro level data. So interventions of the volunteers and of the educational institutions, I think so many of them have also prepared a lot of audiovisual material, and also they have come up with the issue of migrant workers has been kept live by public debates, and it's very important. And now state is also taking it very serious. In fact, the separate government has decided to come up with a separate bureau only on the migrant workers. So I think that's very important. So commission on migrant workers, the way we have a state commission for women, or a state commission for minorities, or my commission for scheduled caste commission, tribal commission. So similarly, there would be commission for migrant workers and their problems. Now, if we see the data from 1st April to 10th June of Ministry of Women and Health and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the national average of estimated number of pregnant women registered with the government was only 24%. That means 75% of the women, rather 76% of the pregnant women, we don't have any record about them because they just lost touch. All the health facilities were for the maternal health were completely disbanded. Everything was diverted to COVID virus. And even the data about the newborn babies, only 17%, 17.47% data is there. So we don't even know where did these women deliver babies. What happened to them? Were they given tetanus injection? Did these children get immunization? Were they given triple antigen? Nothing is there. So country doesn't know that what happened under the lockdown. So and especially those who are moving from one place to other place, about them, there is just no record we have. Same in the agricultural sector, we have the inter-district migration. In the March was a season of harvesting. So massive migration took place from the within the district, wherever there were, like in Maharashtra, for example, you have a sugarcane belt. So in the sugarcane belt, you have more than 3 lakhs migrant workers going from different districts of Maharashtra to the sugar belt. And there also you have a Jodi system. So male worker is considered as a worker. Women workers don't even have identity. So these women, they are not getting any of the official relief packages which the state has given. None of the social security or social protection measures they are getting. Same in the Naka industry, you have a Jodi system. In construction industry, you have Jodi system. So wherever you have Jodi system, women become faceless and their problems don't get visibilized. So what we see that in the agrarian sector, what happened because of the lockdown was that no registered, women were not registered as a workers. They are not registered as a worker. They get unequal wages, both by the state and by the private employers, whether they are the big farmers or the agro-business or the landlords. All of them give unequal wages. Even MG Narega also, they get 1/3 or 2/3 of the wages of men. And also massive food scarcity, which the families face. And it also affected their nutrition and the reproductive health of women. So many women, because all the civil hospitals, primary health centers, they had diverted their services only for coronavirus. So people with comorbidities and women with reproductive health needs, none of them were catered to. Even sanitary pads were not declared as essential services. So it was the NGOs. Now also it is largely NGOs who are distributing sanitary pads, and some local self-government bodies like municipal corporation and municipal council are also pitching in. When it comes to forest economy, we have seen that even the forest economy is so much dependent on the migrant workers, especially the collection of minor forest product, 200 variety of forest produce that you have to collect. And it is in the month of March that all this thing is being sold, either to the pharma industry or to the state. And also they also suffered a lot and massive value loss, because the 55 forest produce, they bring 2,000 crore, okay, and nearly 200 forest produce, they contribute to 38.2 billion. So that is very major loss that tribal communities had. And most of the collection of NTFP, non-timber forest product, and also the minor forest product is done by women. So they are the ones who faced this thing. And 11% of Indian population in the rural and forest area is that of this thing. Now the another attention is that of the nomadic tribes. Nomadic tribes, they are on a constant move. They move with their animals, whether they are goats or cows or other milch animals, and they are the ones who have suffered the most during lockdown, because they would not only for them, but they need fodder for their animal, they need water for their animals. So about them, they have also started now mobilizing, and on a national plane, and Action Aid is working with them. So a lot of things that are done by women in the economy, it is considered, it is totally invisibilized, and the whole discourse on economy is closed. That kind of a discourse is completely neglecting the unpaid work done by women. When it comes to women as health seekers, we have seen that whether it is a sanitary pad or safe childbirth or a neonatal care, emergency contraception, so many, like currently now they are giving a data, Ministry of Health, that more than 1 lakh women have produced, they had unwanted pregnancies, and families gave them any type of unsafe abortion because none of the contraceptive facilities, contraceptives were given by the state. Mostly they are largely distributed by the family planning centers, which they were also not functioning during the lockdown. So a lot of unsafe abortions also took place, about which there is hardly any data. And there are organizations working on women's organization. At least they have the area studies based on their first-hand experience. So as a result of this stoppage of maternal health services, we saw women on move. They delivered babies on the road, train, rickshaw, in front of hospitals, and ASHA workers, police women, people on the road, they were helping them when they faced labor pain. Women also delivered babies in Shramik Express. So many cases of the denial by the hospital to admit women in labor, even in cities like Delhi and Bombay, have happened. Miscarriages, unsafe deliveries, neonatal deaths, maternal mortality, maternal morbidity, safe deliveries, the maternal morbidity increased, and the safe deliveries of babies became a major scarcity. It hardly happened. Child mortality also enhanced. And that's why the feminist groups and the health activists, they have demanded that there is an urgent need for helplines for just pregnant women, so that they know that where would they get admission, because at one level we are facing complete underutilization of the beds currently now allocated for maternity ward, because after a lot of criticism, corona wards have again been converted into maternity wards. So separate corona containment zones have been created, and the quarantine zones have been created with special beds. So now maternity services are slowly and gradually resuming its work. Another very major crisis that the migrant population and migrant gender in migration is very important concern is that of learning through electronic media. We have seen that because of the reverse migration, most of the children of the migrants, they are out of school now. Those who have reached their destination, there also, they just don't have even money to eat. So how can you think of buying smartphone or getting pad to learn online, no? So we have seen a massive dropout of children from school education and college education, and more girls are dropping out of school. That is the data which has now been given by the state, that more girls are dropping out of schools and colleges, and there is an increase in underage marriages and also forced marriages, women in their 16 or 18-year-old girl married to a 50-year-old man for money. And there is so much of food security scarcity in the family that one less mouth to be fed. That is the calculation which the families are making and forcing their daughters to get married. The helplines, Childline has received more than 1 lakh calls, distress calls from the children, the young girls who are being forced into marriage. And some of the pockets, especially in Maharashtra, they say it's a Sholapur, is the on radar, because the many incidences of child marriages have been reported, and state has been able to prevent also. So children of the migrant workers who have gone back to their native place dropped out of school and college education, and they are working also in agriculture as a child labor, and also in the urban informal sector. Many of them are into waste picking, the recycling work, and also in the construction industries also have employed, because child labor is the cheapest labor. So that has also happened. And under the garb of lockdown and under the cloak of lockdown, so many irregularities are happening. 12 states have already abandoned the labor laws. The 48 central labor legislations, protective labor legislation, and 200 state legislations have been abandoned in the name of health emergency and under the name of economic revival. And they are the ones who are getting into all kind of unlawful practice. It means now, first of all, there is total lawlessness in the labor market, and there is a rampant use of child labor, both in agriculture sector and in the urban informal sector. Violence against women has escalated under the lockdown, and also migrant women also, while walking on the way, even while going in a truck, men would sit in the corner, women were cramped in the middle. And so many of them have reported sexual harassment. Even on the journey also, where the truck driver would just stop the truck in the lonely place, and women have faced sexual advances in sexual aggression. So when UN declared violence against women as a shadow pandemic, so shadow pandemic is not only limited to domestic violence where they are in the proximity of their intimate partners and family members, but shadow pandemic is also of a forced marriage, child sexual abuse, trafficking of women and children, forced labor, and also violence against women and girls that is compounded. And in response to that, we saw that NGOs who were responding to distress calls from stranded migrants or students or domestic workers, daily wage workers, hungry people in the slum flats, even in the affluent areas. I think they have documented the kind of the unforeseen violence that women and girls have faced. Even the helplines were inundated with the panic calls, and also and that's why there is a need for the government to come up with a help desk in all government offices, in hospitals, in railway stations, in bus stations, in police stations, for the migrant workers, separated children and separated elderly from their family members. So this kind of advertisement which came up in the newspapers, I think they were needed, I think, in all states in this thing, but I think it did not happen. But this was some of the good practices. But both Childline and the police helpline, they were inundated. They could not even cope up with the distress calls from the migrant workers and domestic workers and daily wage earners and hungry people, lonely people. So when it comes to best practices, when it comes for addressing the multiple challenges which the migrant population faced, and especially women, children, transgender, sex workers, they faced, I think it's very important to have a better communication between civil society and the government, between the elected representatives and the people in in their constituency. So dialogue is important. We need to use information technology in a more judicious and more efficient way so that we can reduce human miseries and also come up with the relief. And I think in this time, the massive relief operations that happened throughout the country is mainly because of the social media, the kind of pictures and stories and videos which were circulated, that sensitized the common people who were in the gated community also to come out of their comfort zone and do the hand holding at a people to people solidarity, the social solidarity that emerged. And people shared the resources, but it has a limitation. What the state can do, individuals cannot. And the appropriate policy, which is grounded in the kind of complexities that we are facing at a ground level, I think that needs to be reflected in the policy. And so policy intervention has to be evidence-based. So when it comes to the relief package by the government, none of the social movements are calling it relief package. They call it economic package, which is of 20 lakh crores, out of which 11 lakh crores are only for rejuvenation of MSMEs. There also, there is no promise of induction of women in the MSMEs, because now the massive reorganization of micro, nano, small and medium industries is taking place. Artificial intelligence, robotics, future of work, they have started talking about. Even in the harvesting in the rural areas, wherever there was a labor shortage, we have seen there is a massive escalation of sale of tractors. So many companies have now started manufacturing tractors because there is shortage of human labor due to lockdown and due to reverse migration. So what is going to happen to women in terms of the job prospects? And the economic independence is the minimum necessary condition for a dignified life, and that is being taken away from women. So how the only one scheme, which is MG Narega, for which 1 lakh crores have been allocated, most of the states have exhausted their annual money in just last 4 months only. So in that also, there is no visualization of induction of women into running of the daycare centers or community kitchen, elderly care centers or shelter homes or maintenance and management of quarantine center, public health center, food processing centers, horticulture, poultry, cottage, craft, even handloom board and handicraft board have been closed down. On the contrary, this is the time we needed, because both handloom and handicraft industry, they are the largest employer of women, and they are the ones who have lost out under lockdown, which happened this month only. Unequal wages is a very important challenge that women in migrant workers are facing under this current situation of economic vulnerability. Increase in the borrowing limit is only from 3 to 5% for the state government. States are facing tremendous resource crunch, and that is comes out in terms of more and more deprivation to the working class and to the helpless migrant workers. Local workers, in any case, they are rooted in the soil, and they have their social capital. But it's the migrant workers who are both in the original place of origin and at the destination. They are the most vulnerable. And increase in the public health expenditure is a demand. Currently, it is only PPE 50 lakh per person for the health professionals, but most of these health professionals, super specialists and the senior doctors, they get all these benefits, not the young ones and not the paraprofessionals or not the frontline workers. It doesn't reach up to them. And there is a demand for a 6% of GDP to be allocated, while the Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana has hardly 15,000 crore, where the need is actually of a 12 lakh crores. So patriarchal bias also in the labor codes. In the lockdown, in the period of lockdown only, we got the wage code, rules for the wage code, and the 4 wage codes, which would replace 48 protective labor legislations and 200 state legislation. And these wage codes are about wages, industrial relations, social security, and occupational safety. None of them mention women as a worker. Only in a occupational safety, where they are talking about the social security, they are talking about the maternity benefits, there they are talking about women. Otherwise, safety of women at workplace or a wash criteria, you need sanitation, you need separate toilet for women, you need a change room if they have to change into the uniform. None of these issues which were earlier there in the Factories Act and all, none of these are mentioned in the wage codes. And 12 states have already abandoned those protective legislations. And we have recently also seen how garment workers, apparel workers, in young women workers in Karnataka, they went on a strike. The employers were making them work for 12 hours a day, and all the tremendous restriction on them. So we have seen that there is a tremendous unrest at the shop floor level among the young, because this is the policy that all the new industries, they are taking unmarried young girls into inducting them in the age group of 15 to 23. They are the ones who are in the sunrise industries. Even in the gig economy, most of them are young women. Now, the package which the government of India gave for the states or for the 116 districts from Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, from where the migration has been highest. These are the states which are providing highest percentage of migrant workers through the industrially advanced states, and they have come up with, because of the reverse migration, government of India came up with the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, and it is administered through various ministries, like the 15 ministries have converged and they have decided to cooperate for rejuvenation of Indian economy and involving the migrant workers, giving them top priority, and for which the financial allocation of 50,000 crore has been given. And they say that they will saturate villages with the public infrastructure and assets, because of public infrastructure, now we need a detection center, we need a infectious disease hospital, we need more and more public health hospitals in the rural areas, because majority of the workers have gone and they have also carried variety of infections while traveling. They traveled in such a hazardous condition that they are prone to illness, and the areas which were earlier not infected, they are also now infected. So there is a need for that kind of infrastructure, and also infrastructure in terms of the usual infrastructure of pakka roads and electrification and all that. So they said that they will saturate with this program. So you can see this 24 to 25 types of schemes which the government has come up with Now, in most of these schemes, it is easy to train girls and women and absorb them. But currently, like there, everything is about even the language of all these documents is also he, him, his. So they presume that all these jobs which are going to be created under Garib Kalyan Rozgar, it is meant to be for a male worker. So women workers are not even seen in their conception. Nowhere are they talking that they will strengthen the Panchayati Raj institutions, because Panchayati Raj institutions, 16 states have, including all these states, have a 50% of elected representatives in Grama Sabha, in district council, and in the urban and municipal council and municipal corporations, 50% of them are women. So involving that into implementation of this Garib Kalyan Yojana, that has also not been thought out. And there is hardly any role so far as the National Commission for Women or the State Commission for Women. They are constantly talking only about the violence against women. But when it comes to integrating women into the economic development, they are completely, there is no vision about that. It is in this context that the major concerns of the women's rights organizations are about some of the pressing issues that the women in general and the migrant women, migrant workers in particular are facing. One is the reproductive health services, sanitary kit, menstrual health supplies, maternal health care, immunization, and vaccination. They are supposed to, they should be given as a priority essential services for women. Ensure availability of curfew passes for the family members of pregnant women so that they don't get brutalized by the police. Fully functional ICDS centers, both in the rural and urban areas, are very important. Resume midday meal scheme. Midday meal scheme was so important right from 2012. All over India, we had a right to food. As a result of right to food campaign, midday meal was providing at least one hot meal of children from poverty groups, lactating mothers and pregnant women. That was also disbanded during the COVID lockdown. That has to be resumed in a full scale. Major role of elected women representatives in the Panchayati Raj institutions, both in urban and rural areas, and self-help groups, very important. They have played a very important role in providing sanitary material, and they have also provided ration kits. States after states are reporting how the SHGs function during the pandemic. A balanced diet for pregnant and lactating mothers, more provision, make provision for 90 days of wages to all pregnant women in the third trimester, and also lactating women with infants which are aged less than 6 months. Services of women's helpline, short stay home, child helpline need to be kept fully functional and should be classified as essential services. Under no circumstances you can stop these services. That is important. Directory of support services, because now it is easy. Online PDF file can be given to, can be uploaded in the district panchayat, in the government offices for the stranded students, women-headed households, persons with disability, for transgender community, and combating increased child marriages and gender-based violence, which have escalated under the pandemic. So I think that these are very important. Another very important concern that we have is that when it comes to the demand side, it is very important to have a fixed fiscal expansion, more credit facilities to the self-employed women, income support to the whole migrant or informal sector workers. And in terms of supply side intervention, the macroeconomic interventions are also already state is taking under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Yojana. More facilities they are giving to the employers. Safety and personal protection equipments for frontline health workers. Water and sanitation are extremely important. So in the all poor localities, clean water and drinking water, as well as water for consumption and washing of hands, should be provided. That should be considered as a extremely important essential service. Arrangement for safe return of all migrant workers, empower elected women in local self-government bodies for implementation of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and Garib Kalyan Yojana, and also equal opportunities for women under Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme, because wide range of economic services and economic projects are envisaged everywhere in the, except for Kerala. No other state has even promised that women will be integrated into all these rejuvenation of economic program. opportunities for women in the Stand Up India, Startup India, Make in India, and capacity building for future of work, where the massive automation is coming in Indian economy. So we have to make women job ready. A labor helpline which should be accessible in the regional languages, particularly in Hindi, Kannada, Gujarati, Oriya, Bengali, where the migrant workers are coming from. So they can, and it should not only about the movement of the migrant or the curfew passes, but it should also be address the issues of wage denial, layoffs, termination of services, workplace discrimination, police brutality, sudden forceful in eviction and all. And it is very important to visualize data on migration, pattern of migration, migrant workers, and gender disaggregated data of the migration is very important, because what is measured gets done. So good quality data that ensures visibility of women in statistics and indicators, whether these are the statistics about health, education, workforce participation, migration, violence against women, cybercrime, abuse in COVID care center, we need an integrated database. That is a top priority, and it is not even difficult. It's only a question of political will. Gender sensitization of government departments to change their patriarchal attitude in language they understand and the context in which they work. I think it's very important, so that suboptimal implementation can be avoided. So you park the money, but the bureaucrats don't have any vision how to use this money. So you may have a massive money collected in the chief minister fund or a prime minister fund, but how to use that fund, unless there is a clarity about that. And if there is a patriarchal bias, they will completely leave out women from utilization of these funds. And also what kind of, so functions and functionaries, I think all of them have to be gender sensitized. Dismantle the anti-women community norms, and also the community norms such as child marriages or trafficking of children, or making children making them child workers. So this may be with the blessing of the community leaders, but I think they need to be challenged and reconstruct new norms that act as enabler for women and girls. And behavioral change is also very, very important in the campaign. So both the conceptual and operational biases, they need to be challenged in the civil society, in the policy making, and in the conceptualization and implementation of the programs and schemes. And bringing gender lens in all this is very important. We also need to institutionalize memories to generate template for future. So this is an excellent, very, very important learning experience. In last 6 months, we all have learned so much from for our own suffering, what we have seen all around. I think it's very important to learn from these experiences, so that in future we can avoid this kind of a hardship and tremendous emergencies and the human miseries. Promote partnership of local government with the social organizations. So I think it is very important, because social organizations are rooted. They are the ones who transcended coronaphobia and worked with the masses. So I think it's very important for them to, the governance structures need to work in collaboration with them. So reduction of social inequality in care services is very important. We need to combat the gender exclusion and ensure justice, equity, and dignity. And also equitable sharing of domestic tasks becomes very important across the class line, whether it's a middle class or a working class. Everywhere we need to promote the values of sharing of housework, because women are overburdened. Everywhere they are overburdened. Ensure increase in access to sanitation and emergency shelter spaces for unhoused people. So many people are still on the way. Guarantee women's access to basic infrastructure, skills, and affirmative action. The implementation of a protocol and train authorities on recognizing and engaging vulnerable population. That is very important. So variety, like we have heard, so many communities about which we hardly thought about. The people who do the instrumental repairs, the seasonal migrants, because they migrate only in some migrate only in summer, or nomadic tribes, or those who collect the minor forest products. All of them are seasonal migrants. So I think it is very important to train the authorities that how democratically they need to behave, how they have to communicate about the new rules and regulations, and not to use force. So it's very important. Involve Panchayati Raj institutions in implementation of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and Garib Kalyan Yojana. And also consultation of government bodies with the civil society organizations are a must for implementation of legislation, policy, and for guaranteeing equal access to information, public health education, and resources in multiple languages. And also we need to resume the state funded provision for the child care facilities, both in the rural areas, because the MG Narega is a major employer currently with a very high budget. So I think even in the rural areas, women who are working in the field or whatever non-agricultural activities in the rural areas and in the urban areas also, they need, because now everywhere in the informal sector, they are increasing the labor intensity and the working hours from 8 to 12 hours. So I think we need childcare facilities. At one level, we'll have to fight for the labor standards, and at the same time, we also need to ask for childcare facilities, which none of the labor codes talk about. State-funded low-rent housing for the migrant workers is a need of an hour, and there also there should be quota for women and other socially excluded people. So universal
Sorry
basic
to
income.
interrupt,
This
Vibhuti
is the
ma'am.
last
We have,
one.
okay.
This is the last
There
one.
are a few questions.
So
Yeah, oh.
yeah, so globally, there is a demand for a universal basic income. Those who were completely sold out to market fundamentalism and neoliberal logic, they have also now started talking about strengthening of demand side by giving cash to the people, so that at least we will have an upward spiral of the economy. And along with the human rights organization, the state needs to adopt human rights oriented protocol with regard to people in prison, administrative migration centers, because now every village, wherever people are moving, they are quarantined for 2 weeks. So quarantine centers, confinement camps, people with disabilities in the institutions, and psychiatric facilities. So that is very important. These are some of the rapid assessment studies done during last 4 or 5 months. So I have given the references, and our article on migration has appeared in Economic and Political Weekly, current issue, latest issue of the media. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel, for bringing in so many issues of gender in migration, especially during the COVID times. And as you rightly pointed, that gender is very much left out of the discussion of the main course. And people are only talking about, till date, we're only talking about the economic crisis, which was anyway in the making. But the critical points here to ponder are the need about the absolute low level of public health expenditure, as you pointed out, food scarcity, starvation, declining nutritional standards, and labor workforce participation, which was declining. Now it is further going to get highlighted, because the brunt of the job losses, both in the formal and the informal sector, are being borne by everybody, but especially women.
Yeah.
So thank you for pointing out all of this, and the institutional deliveries, which has also got impacted during this process. The access to reproductive health and has been severely impacted. So thank you for bringing out all these important points which are otherwise left out of discussion. There are a few questions which our participants have had, and I'll just take it up. Megha Tomar wants to know that there are so many feminist movements in India, and how have those movements helped in bringing down the basis against women during the time of pandemic, as we have just seen the negative impacts of COVID on women, but have not heard any positive news stroke interventions which has helped in lowering the biases.
Yeah. So see, women's movement have made 5 strategic interventions under the COVID-19. So immediately after the lockdown was declared, within 10 days, women's organizations came up with a poster, because they were inundated with the panic calls from women about the domestic violence, because in the normal circumstances, they would run away from the tormentor. But the lockdown situation did not even allow that. It did not even allow the neighbors to intervene. Okay, everyone was so, the whole propaganda about the social distancing was so strong that nobody would even come to help you. Police was also, their duty was completely diverted to COVID virus and all the curfew rules and all. So even police helpline was not working. So first intervention was, main damage control was that of a helpline for women survivor and children, child sexual abuse and domestic violence, sexual violence, cyber violence, all that they were providing the services, connecting them. They also demanded from the state to start a one-stop crisis center. So you can see within 1 month of lockdown, we saw 13 municipal hospitals in Mumbai started a separate ward for women survivor of violence. It's a very different issue that gatekeepers would not allow them in because they say without COVID test, we will not take you in. So there was initially, beds were empty and women were suffering outside. So those things immediately it happened, but immediately they were constantly monitoring and they were in touch with that. So they tried to address that. That is the first thing, violence against women. Second one was about the reproductive health issues. So many women who were in labor pain, those who were not given vaccination in the 7th month of pregnancy, children who were not given a vaccination, their illness, neonatal problems, they were attended to by the women's organization by connecting them with the sympathetic doctors or with the government facilities. This thing. Third one, that they started help desk within the hospital wherever it was possible, and wherever they had a rapport with the civil hospital or government hospital or municipal hospital, within the hospital only, they just sat with the table and chair and they provided uh, uh, exact information, or because they had rapport with the doctors and the medical facility also, they facilitated and eased out the situation and addressed the emergency. So that was the third this thing, creating. Fourth one, that for many of them either contributed financially or in cash or actual labor of running the, providing the ration kits. For example, say Vacha. Vacha is in the 12th round of providing ration kits. Okay, every week they would give, and in one kit there would be 16 items. Okay? There's a grain, cereals, sanitary material, soap, toothpaste, hair oil, everything. Well, they know that people are completely resourceless, and they also did. You saw in one slide I showed how they were doing the need assessment. They were not doing untargeted philanthropy. Okay, they were actually going into, they were maintaining the records, they were knowing who needs what. If you have a diabetic patient, you need this kind of food. If there is a health emergency, the heart patient would know this medicine. So all their health emergencies, food necessity of a food, so that was also looked after. In community kitchen, they are big all over India. Women, whether they are Delhi women's groups or group in Baroda, Sahir, they worked with ActionAid, and they both, those who had cooking gas and who were part of Ujjwala scheme, and so they were given ration kit. But those who did not have anything, not even cooking oil or a safe drinking water, so they networked with the local self-government bodies for the tanker of water, or they asked the CSR corporates to use the playground to create the tent for 1,200 migrant people, homeless people, and all. So running of community kitchens also very important, which where the women's organization contributed. Like in Bhiwandi, 12,000 workers were being fed. They were fed up when the BMC was giving them only khichdi every day, and that khichdi was nothing but PDS rice, in that only salt and turmeric powder. And that they were fed up, and they said, we are going back, and Bhiwandi is needed, because without power loom, how will you get your cloth material? So it was Gurudwara as well as the civil society organization, including women's organization, they were managing. So this is the fourth one. And the fifth one was that of filing public interest litigations to make the state responsible. Because whatever said and done, with whatever commitment, our resources are limited. We can reach out to hundreds and thousands. State can reach out to millions and crores. Okay, so inviting the attention of state to come up with the evidence, because they had evidences, they had rapid assessment while doing the relief work. They were also collecting data, and it was a part using the participatory action method research, and came up. Currently, if you see, 40 to 50 rapid assessment studies are available in our country. out of which I think 40% of them are by the women's organization. And that's why what kind of social security measures, social intervention and emergency measures that we need to take. So many of them came out with a manual also. Then also the training, they were doing the training that under the lockdown, how are you going to do the counseling? Under the lockdown, how are you going to connect survivor of a violence, person facing violence in the family with the health system or with the police criminal justice system. So all that work women's organizations did, but still it is the state which has to do all this. The ability of the state, and especially when everything, all the private fundings, all the CSR fundings is channelized either in the Prime Minister Relief Fund or the Chief Minister Relief Fund. While the NGOs and the women's organizations are managing from the crowdfunding. Whatever they were getting through crowdfunding or from their sympathizer in cash and kind, they were utilizing for the relief operations. But they were working 24/7.
Okay. The second question is
Vibhuti?
from Lata Pujari. She's asking about the parameters or the steps taken to solve the the folk artist financial issues.
Yeah, that's what.
So,
That's why they say that so many people about whom we never even paid attention. So it is a folk artist because at the time of Holi or at the time of festival or at the time of Ganpati, that is the only time they can earn cash. Rest of the time, either they are marginal farmers or agriculture laborers or they are poor peasants. So for them, this is seasonal. They are the seasonal migrants. Okay, so folk artist, puppet, this thing, or rabaris or Maldharis. Currently, the Maldharis, All India convention is taking place of Maldharis. They work with Action Aid. These are the people who have been completely invisibilized. And first time in the pandemic, when they faced tremendous hardship because they were on the road, because that's how they live. They wherever they are constantly on move, and they create their tent. No, but Vimukta people, the nomadic tribes and all. So I think first time the attention is invited to their life, providing support system, keeping into consideration their lifestyle, because they will go wherever the grass is available. Okay, so they will take their herds there. So instead of beating them up or just telling, using all the stringent rules of the lockdown and brutalizing them, I think it's important for them that they provide fodder, they provide water, they allow them to stay in a tent, and also explain to them in a simple language that why they have to maintain physical isolation or physical distance. No? So,
okay.
Yeah, Sangeeta, can I just intervene
Yes.
once? Yeah, there is one
Yes.
very interesting question, Vibhuti. Somebody is asking what kind of theoretical
Yes.
formulation you
Yes.
would
I was
like
just
to
coming to that.
formulate. Yeah, sorry, because
yeah.
you would like to formulate in formal and informal sectors post COVID-19.
Yeah, I think, see, in
Somebody,
terms of theoretical formulation for formal sector, first of all, formal sector in any way is going to be totally marginal with the future of work, because it's now what we are moving towards is a gig economy. And also in terms of factory-based production, or in, we had already moved away from the the Fordian way of labor processes and labor relations, where you have thousands of workers working under the same roof. So it is a decentralized production that is going to take place. Another thing which this health emergency has shown is that it is going to be anti-globalization. So that was a time, like in the 2000, we were talking only about globalization, economic globalization, free movement of capital and financial capital reigning supreme, because we have seen what financial capital was not of much use under the lockdown. Okay, so I think that in terms of theorization, we will have to think about the local economy and how to address the day-to-day gender-based division of labor. That is very important. So social equality, where there is a sharing and caring across the gender and caste and class and this thing, so that those barriers of division of labor that we need to break. So it will be more of a decentralized anti-globalization wave. Plus, most of the countries after 2008 have become more inward looking, because that we saw everywhere there are protections and tariff barriers, which most of the richest countries did the first. They are the ones who did not allow Chinese and Japanese goods to enter. So each and every nation state is now becoming more and more inward looking. So we will have to depend on our national human resource and material resources. We'll have to increasingly depend on our own resources. But at the same time, what we see is that because of the whole the information sector, like information technology based, this thing has also made it easier for people to enhance their knowledge very fast. Because what we can see when we have a physical class where teacher and student are meeting each other, there is a limitation, because you need massive infrastructure, you need a building, and you need chair, and you need a support system and all. But now when it is a home-based learning, like now the new formula that is emerging globally is that 30% online teaching, 20% face-to-face teacher interaction with this teacher and mentoring, and remaining 50% is actual interaction with the reality. So it's a complete and whatever social sciences or ideological or conceptual learning you want to have, you will take it by download all those files and books and this thing. Use massive online resources like Harvard has completely e-ed. Everything is available for free. Or Yale, most of even the Coursera has made things. So there is a more of a democratization of educational information happening at one level. And that's why the focus will be more on how to become more and more self-dependent and how to strengthen the local economy, because we saw what there were barriers the whole last 6 months. Everywhere we have seen barrier within your colony, barrier within your building, barriers between one ward to another ward, barrier between two states, barrier between two cities. So everywhere we have seen that isolation. So it is keeping this thing into consideration. And if the predictions of the health specialist is that it's going to this kind of a virus attacks are going to be very perennial, it's going to be, because now the mutation is taking place so fast. So we will have to reorganize our lifestyle. So it is in this context that I think strengthening of local this thing, even people's mindset is changing. Those who were planning earlier to move to the center place or metropolis, now they are not bothered. They said, no, if it is a home-based work, whether I am in the outskirts of the city or I am in the center of the city, it hardly matters. What I need is a comfortable place. And if I get a cheaper place in the Mufassil area or away from the city, I don't mind. So even the housing industry is also facing this thing, that obsession about getting centrally located place, that is also going away. So, and that is not only for the employees, but even the employers are thinking that way. Like BKC, so many of the BKC buildings have been given up by the industry, because they say that now they are going to encourage more and more work from home. So I think we will have to think about the decentralization and also strengthening of neighborhood, because in the final analysis, that is going to stand by you at the time of crisis. You may have many close friends and relatives. If they are away, they are not going to be of any support at the time of emergency. No? So that isolation and atomization with the neoliberal thinking had given, I think that will have to go. The strengthening of neighborhood, I think that is going to be, and creation of social capital, I think that is very important for theoretical in terms of theoretical understanding, that how to enhance the social capital by increasing and human interaction, and also building trust, relationship of trust in your neighborhood. That is going to be very important. And here also the women will have a strategic role to play, because they are the ones who are always ahead in terms of community management. No? Yeah.
Next question, but I think you have already answered it, Professor Vibhuti Patel. The next question was from Dr. V. Manika Vellu. It's to what are the steps that have been taken to hike economy by the government side? But I think you have partly answered that question already.
Yeah. So the currently government is focusing on these two, Atmanirbhar Bharat and Garib Kalyan Yojana. Moreover, they said that the kind of schemes we have, MG Narega, similarly they want similar scheme for the city, about which they are going to. So all the unemployed people who have come back to the city after reverse migration, so many workers have 30% of the workers, migrant workers, are moving again back to the city because they have nothing in the village, or their relatives, they don't want them. So they are also unemployed currently. So even in the urban areas, you will need employment guarantee scheme. So that is also the government's macro level they are thinking. In fact, 2 states have already started, Bihar and Jharkhand. They have started skill mapping of the migrant workers, those who have reverse migrated. Their skill mapping they have done, and accordingly they will rope them into new industries which they want to start in their own states. So that this whole thing, because these are the my first map of India, where I share that which are the supplying countries, no, that so they also now realize that they have to industrialize, and they have to develop their own economy, so that this kind of exodus doesn't take place.
Thank you so much, Vibhuti ma'am. Now, may I request Dr. Putul Sathe to say a few words and wrap the session.
Yeah, thank you, Vibhuti. That was a wonderful lecture. In fact, I think the manner in which gender as a category was used to analyze or to look at the entire situation, I think was something very, really very important for us. So I thank you, Vibhuti. And with this, we come to the end of this session. Our next lecture will be on 2nd of September. So I hope that we look forward to meeting everybody. And I thank Vibhuti once again. Vibhuti, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Very good.